So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've captured the actual code that the old tool uses from previous versions of Maya, and the tool still exists in newer versions of Maya. You just can't access it through any menus. So I've got the code right here, and this is what I use all the time now. It's pretty similar, except it's more reliable, and that's about it. It doesn't look as pretty. That's one thing it has going against it, but it tends to work better. So you're free to use either one of these, but this is the one I'll be using all the time. I've got it on a hotkey, the S button on my Maya. So just one quick tip about something here. If you want to, you can drag across multiple faces at once. In fact, you can even drag across multiple faces diagonally, and it'll work just the same. To finish the tool, you just hit Enter. Or you could hit the same tool again. So I'm cutting, and now I'm just going to hit S again. It's going to close out the tool, and it's going to give me a new session of it right away. So pretty straightforward. The reason I was making such a big deal about this is because this is the fundamental tool that we'll be using probably most often in this class and in your modeling career. So there's a certain way. Well, let me back up and say again. You remember when we were looking at the character faces? Let me open up some stuff for you here. Let me just pause the video. Okay, so here's one of the characters I showed you earlier. I think I showed you earlier. Anyway, this is Spock that I modeled. And if you look at his wireframe, you can see that he has edges that are running down his face in very specific and intentional ways. Edges like this one, which make up his smile line, like I like to call it, which is, you know, sort of this crease that everybody has on their face from emoting and smiling and that sort of thing. It just makes up the division of fat underneath the skin here, where it meets these muscles that wrap around here for the mouth. So we've got edges like this, and we've got edges around the eye. You know, they're sort of concentric and running around. Same thing with the nostril. Anywhere that I wanted to create some sort of crease is where I would put edges like that. You know, you could look at the lips here. See how we've got concentric rings coming along? So the way that I created those edges was using the split polygon tool and turning a otherwise somewhat random looking array of edges into something a little bit more organized that I could use to create the shapes that I wanted to get. And so the best way to show you this is really just with a polygon plane again. So let's imagine that I've got two planes here, and I want to make, let's just imagine that this is a landscape, and I want to make a riverbed that runs through here. Well, the first thing you might think of based on the tools we've already been using is the Sculpt geometry tool. Okay, and so that could work pretty well, right? Like we can go in here. I'm going to use the push brush. Let's turn up the volume a little bit here and begin sculpting across. And we can get a fairly nice looking river at a glance. Or can we? See, when I smooth it, I've got all sorts of little jaggedies here. And looking at it without the smooth on, we can see we've got some artifacting. Because what's ultimately happening in some of the situations here is you get a face that becomes sheared, and it makes an impossible shape. What I mean by that is, you remember how I said that every polygon face has to be square and flat in actuality. What happens sometimes is you get a vertice like this, and it's no longer tangent upon a plane. So these two are relatively flat compared to each other. Even this one sort of works, but this would never work. And you can see that if you look at it up close, it sort of doesn't make sense, like it's getting lost. And it's actually drawing some invisible lines here. See that? How we've got that silhouette? But there's supposed to be nothing there, right? There actually is nothing there. But it's getting confused. It doesn't know what to do. So this is a problem. If we want to get nice sharp lines here, we're going to have a really hard time doing it this way. In fact, you'd have to have 4 or 5 or 6 times more polygons than what we have here And that's how the program ZBrush works, but we'll talk about that later. In Maya, you don't have the ability to just keep dividing and dividing and dividing and dividing until you have no more problems. Because now you can see already, even though I've got a fairly new computer, it's kind of stuttering just a little bit. It's working a little bit harder. And that's the major principle behind efficient modeling. We want to try to avoid doing that. So what I might do instead on this plane is cut the geometry in that I want. And let me actually start with a plane that has a little bit fewer edges. And I'll try and recreate this exact same shape over here, the quote-unquote right way. Okay, so let's start with something like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter my split polygon tool right there, also on my hotkey, and I'm going to begin drawing in. Oh yeah, here's a tip. If you click in the wrong direction, you want to go backwards, just hit the backspace button. It'll undo your points that you lay down. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of arbitrarily draw my river. I'm just sort of using this as a loose reference. Okay. And just fix these a little bit. Make them a little bit more sinuous. Okay, good enough for now. And now I'm going to go ahead and click for the other bank. The other side of the river. Alright. Now I'm going to get in here and I'm going to delete these edges. So I'm not just hitting the delete button, but I'm actually using that tool, delete edge. Also, you can see the history building up here. We'll get rid of that in a second. So in some cases, I don't want to get rid of that vertice, so I am going to hit the delete key now for that one. Okay, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag, cut in some edges here. One of the golden rules of polygon modeling are that you want to try and keep things, keep all your polygon faces with 4 edges if you can. I'm not sure if I showed you this tool. There's a function called collapse, which will take an edge and just collapse it down to nothing and get rid of those extra vertices. That's under the Edit Mesh Collapse. And I'm doing that to get rid of these triangles here. I can get rid of this vertex. I'm going to collapse that one and collapse this one. Okay, so this is a 5-sided polygon, and this is a 5-sided polygon, but now they're both 4-sided polygons. I'm going to collapse that down. Okay, so I won't go across the entire river, but I'll just clean up this portion and show you. So I'm using that scale pivot tool now, just because it's faster for me. And try and get this river to be more or less curvy, not so blocky. I'm going to slide this edge in, slide edge tool. Collapse that edge down. I'm going to build a edge loop, insert an edge loop right there. Do the same thing here. This I'm just going to collapse these down here. Oh, and by the way, you can select multiple edges at once and collapse them. Okay, so bear with me. I'm just going to get rid of this up here. I could go across this whole thing, but for the sake of time, we'll just deal with this one little curve. Okay, so I like the way the river is shaped right now. It's kind of hard to see where the river is, so let's add some depth. I'm going to add a split edge, use the split edge tool, and hopefully, actually this is not quite right. You see the way the tool works is it always finds the edge next to it. In this case it's going to go down in this way, which I don't want. So what I need to do is change the geometry here. Get rid of these. And I'm adding in these edges just so I can keep these all quadrangulated. Technical term. Okay, now this should flow. And I can test it. Grab an edge and convert it to a face path. Bingo. Now I know that my inserting edge loop tool is going to work just fine. So you can see how it's going right down the path that I specified. I'm going to grab this face path now and pull this down. And I'm going to insert a couple edge loops right up here along the top, working in the rule of 3 here. And now when I smooth this, I'm going to get an infinitely cleaner line with far fewer points. So that's the basic principle of this. And I would like you to try this on your own. I would like you to go ahead, grab a plane, and make a river path, or a question mark, or a symbol, maybe your name. Not your name, but maybe a letter, something like that, and carve it out. And then pull down the edges and do exactly what I've done here, and see how it looks. Also, one more quick tool. I think I have it up here. If I don't have it up here now, I will get it to you soon. Oh yeah, here it is. This is a little tool I've got that hides the wireframe. So when I'm working, I usually work with this button turned on. It's the wireframe on shaded mode. But sometimes I like to see what things look like without the edges, without having to go up here and turn this off. So I'll just hit this button, which is a hotkey for me. And it says EJL, those are my initials. Hide wires on. And one more quick tip before we wrap up here. If you want to use the relax tool on this mesh now, I'm going to keep the edges hidden. So I'm still on the push sculpt tool, but I'm going to hold down the U button, left mouse button, then relax. If I were feeling kind of artistic about this, maybe I want to break up this edge a little bit so that it's not completely uniform all the way across. This is one way you can do that real easy. So sometimes it has unpredictable results depending on the geometry, but just soften that up a little bit. When we go back to wireframe mode, you can see what's happening. It's just spreading those edges out a little bit. So maybe that's a more realistic bank for our river. Anyway, just a quick tip. But I hope that the difference between these two surfaces is pretty clear to you. One is much more elegant and in control of what's happening, and the other one is out of control and sort of approximate. And if you tried to make a character face this way, there is no way you could do it, at least not in Maya. So just some food for thought. So please go ahead and try out all the tools that I've gone over today, and watch the video again if you need to, and really get comfortable with them, because the tools we looked at today and the tools we've already been using so far in this class are going to be fundamental moving forward, because we're going to start modeling some stuff that's a little bit more complex now, and the speed of the class is going to move up a little bit, and I don't want you to feel left behind. So definitely practice with those tools and get comfy with them, put them on a hotkey, and practice your workflow and model some things. You know, it'd be kind of cool if you could model like your wristwatch or just common household objects, just to get some practice. The more you do this, the better you're going to feel, the more confident, and the faster you're going to go, and you'll have a better time in the class too. So hop to it. And good luck, and I'll see you next time.